And I have to do that whole introduction again?
That'd be nice.
Okay. I'm not normally this grumpy. Okay, let's do it. So it's a great pleasure to have a chance to talk to Michael Thompson, who's Professor of Philosophy at the University of Pittsburgh and the author of the acclaimed monograph Life and Action, published by Harvard University Press. Michael, I thought I'd begin by asking you something about who the philosophers are who've marked your work most deeply.
I guess I was thinking Philippa Foot, my teacher, and Elizabeth Anscombe, her sometime colleague, and are the sort of 20th century philosophers that affect me most. What about
And can you say a bit more about what particular topics in their work interested you?
Well, Foot wrote almost entirely on ethics in one way or another, different parts of it, all parts of it really, and then some pieces of things on philosophy of mind. But Anscombe, of course, was a kind of a super philosopher who wrote about everything, above all, partly about ethics. Though, I mean, she was a very pious Catholic, so her ethical views, tend to be different from what most of us would accept. Foot, her close colleague, saw past this, though. And Foot was kind of atheistical type, you know. But in any case, but Anscombe, right, it's more her kind of just her philosophy of action and the mind, I suppose, and certain things like that affect one especially. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So tonight you're speaking about philosophy of action specifically.
Right. Well, the series is on philosophy of action, but I'll be talking about action and explanation of action, but especially explanation of action by reference to another in the way that is characteristic of justice or taking account of someone in, certain kinds of moral recognition of others, let's say. What is it to do something? Because my title was, what is it? She did it because she promised Meredith she would, right? So what is it to do something because of a promise, but in particular because of the other who's in the promise? That's my topic today. Mm-hmm. It's about action, it's about the explanation of action, and then a specifically moral, ethical form of action explanation. Right.
So we're bringing in concepts like justice, for example.
Right. So
So there's clearly already a strong connection in what you just said with ethics generally.
Right. So it won't be mostly about ethics in the sense of figuring out what things are right or wrong, but I think most of the problems of ethics anyway even in that sense turn on the comprehension of the, as you might say, the virtuous subject and what's going on with her and how we're to comprehend her activity and how and so in this case the question is how the other comes into the calculation and affects or the reasoning of the just agent, the virtuous agent who's, justice is the virtue that regard in relation to others, how does the other come into my thoughts in such a way as, if I've got it right and I'm just, so to speak, that's the topic, yeah. It's only if you understand something about that you can see what claims about, what in general we should do and what rights we have and so on, this kind of stuff, that those questions can really have any content, I think, and you're lost if you don't inquire about both what we should be doing in relation to others and what it is for an agent to as it were channel the other in the way that's characteristic of justice. Mm-hmm. If you don't keep those both before your mind, there's this opposing way. If you don't keep them both before your mind, then the topic of what things we ought to do in relation to others becomes kind of dogmatic, a dogmatic enumeration of duties or something, and the other one about what's characteristic of the dependence of the just agent's action on the facts. But I hit the brakes because I'm about to run over someone, or I do this thing even though it's painful or something because I promised Meredith I would, or whatever. If you don't, if you just investigate that, then that's a psychological topic or whatever. Leaving aside the question of what we owe each other in fact or something like that. If not as a topic in ethics, then you just fill it up with psychological claims. Mm-hmm. I think those will all. And wisdoms about we do it from respect for them or something like this, and from a feeling of respect, and so on. And I don't think you won't make any progress there either.
Mm-hmm. So in some sense, the philosophy of action in your work is it right to characterize it as preliminary to a wider ethical
Right.
project, or as part of
Oh yeah,
a
of
wider
course. Yeah,
ethical
sorry,
project?
that's right. I mean, I don't think the parts of philosophy. Well, I don't know how to put. But yeah, no, I think of action theory as for the sake of ethics, or that's certainly the way I practice it, and I think that's the way Anscombe practiced too. But then what's amazing is that Anscombe, in her book Intention, which sort of started the subject, is unrelenting in divorcing it from ethics. We must not let any ethical views intrude. You know, I'm very glad not to be doing ethics. She says, I mean, if we, it distracts us from the. I mean, I think that's because it's something he could have concluded immediately. It's because I think it's in a sense also a conclusion of the book that there's a kind of pure metaphysical inquiry that's possible here, that we miss this kind of logic. I don't know. This very pure, it's very kind of. I mean, it's a quasi-logical inquiry which you might just miss if you let ethical ideas intrude somehow. But then once it's there, then you have to kind of locate it. Yeah, the structures of action explanation, of doing one thing for the sake of another, the practical syllogism about how to do something, all these things, once you've got them all on the table, then you can go for the ethical, which is something further somehow.
So in your own work, you've pursued this kind of what you just called quasi-logical inquiry,
Yeah.
I think, as well.
Right. There, I think, following the model of Anscombe's Intention, right? So, my small way, the godlike instinct. But anyway, yes.
And is that project itself, that is this quasi-logical project, informed by any other philosophers other than Anscombe? Would you say?
Yeah, well, Foote, of course, she's kind of a collaborator of mine, so in her book, Natural Goodness. It's also, in some ways I'm trying ever so slowly to defend something like the theses of natural goodness, which I think, we sort of, but I'm much slower and maybe more Anscombe-like in sort of slower build-up, but
and natural goodness itself is in some way an Aristotelian.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Presents itself as an Aristotelian approach.
Right. Yes, so, yes, we're followers of Aristotle, in our, whatever, ultra-modern way. Let's limit that.